Greetings. This episode looks at a case where identity, secrets, and love come together violently. When a newlywed husband learns that his wife is transgender, it leads to a gruesome murder that destroys lives. Come along as we investigate the perilous effects of concealed truths and untangle the specifics of this terrible tale. Ava Collins, 29, was a cherished librarian at San Diego's Morphew Elementary School, renowned for her kind demeanor and innovative approach to her work, introducing LGBT literature to children. Her enthusiasm extended beyond literature to include making sure each kid recognized themselves in the tales they read. Born Allen and transsexual, Ava had gone through her own self-discovery years before, but she had decided to keep that aspect of her life hidden, even from her new husband Jason. She hoped that her current self, a loving woman who cherished her work, her pupils, and most importantly her husband, was what really counted. Jason Collins, a 32-year-old Marine assigned to Camp Pendleton, was introduced to Ava. They met through mutual acquaintances at a local veterans charity event in San Diego's Gaslamp Quarter in the fall of 2012. The extroverted charisma of Ava appealed to Jason, who was known for having a solid and calm demeanor. Their friendship rapidly grew because they shared ideas, such as helping others. They got married in a small private ceremony in early 2014, with family and friends in attendance. At last, Ava felt as though her life was coming together. Despite having her ideal career and a loving spouse by her side, she continued to bear the weight of her secret. Despite her faith in the power of her love for Jason, Ava was concerned about his reaction if he found out she was transsexual. Jason worked in a conservative military neighborhood. Ava was aware that approval wasn't always assured. Ava was reminded that revealing her history as a man could cause everything to fall apart by Jason's conventional, fervently Christian family values, which occasionally surfaced in their interactions. She didn't discuss anything about her life before to their meeting in order to protect her secrets. When Jason inquired about her early years, Ava would deftly steer the topic in a different direction or provide succinct responses. She even kept her employment a secret from Jason, telling him only that she worked with books so that they could concentrate on their future goals and ambitions. Ava was troubled by her battle to conceal her gender identification. She shared her experience with a few close friends, such as her best friend and former lover, Laura Martinez, but it felt strange to withhold the truth from Jason. Ava frequently questioned in secret whether her love for Jason could withstand the pressure of her male background. She feared losing him as much as she loved him. Because of the emotional toll the secrecy took, she occasionally wondered if she would ever be completely fearless after a demanding workday. Ava was most joyful and most vulnerable in March 2014, a few weeks before she passed away. Now that she was married and surrounded by people who knew and admired her, she had finally found her footing. One day, she prayed, she would be able to tell Jason the truth and he would still love her. However, she felt in her heart that every day she concealed her background was a risk, a danger that would lead to her death. Jason Collins made a startling find shortly after sunrise on the morning of March 25, 2014. He went back to his modest apartment on 5th Avenue in the hip Hillcrest section of San Diego, where he lived with his wife Ava. He would never be able to forget the scene he entered. The lifeless, nude body of Ava was splayed over their bed. In addition to the obvious evidence of a struggle, sheets ripped, a bedside lamp knocked over, and Ava's favorite book, The Tropic of Cancer, thrown on the floor. She also had signs of strangulation. Unable to comprehend what he was witnessing, Jason was in a state of shock. Jason stumbled back in disbelief and called 911, describing the horrific image in a panicky voice. Because of the apartment's convenient placement in the bustling neighborhood, first responders reached it in a matter of minutes. Paramedics and police officers entered the apartment, immediately noticing the signs of violence and carefully securing the area to preserve evidence. Officers on the scene initially reacted as though they had not often seen such a vicious attack in this peaceful residential neighborhood. The pair was described as quiet and respectful by the neighbors, who said they had not heard anything strange the previous evening. According to a neighbor, the couple kept to themselves and were frequently spotted together on the weekends at local locations like Thorn Street Brewery in North Park or Balboa Park. However, none of these facts could account for the horrific catastrophe that detectives are currently dealing with. There was a mixture of shock and bewilderment in the quiet street as the police started to collect evidence. Police quickly rushed at the site as locals struggled to understand what had happened just a few doors down, and seasoned officer Mark Evans left the investigation. Evans, a seasoned investigator with a solid track record, was renowned for his meticulous methodology. He scrutinized every inch of the flat as he entered, looking for evidence of a bloody conflict. The tattered bed linens, ripped lamp cord, and strewn about possessions all suggested a deadly altercation. There were small but noticeable bloodstains on the bed linens, indicating Ava had retaliated. Investigators were perplexed by more than just the bruises around her neck, which established strangulation as the most likely cause of death. Upon closer inspection, Evans and his crew discovered odd scars close to Ava's lower abdomen and chest. The symmetrical positioning of these scars, which showed up around her breasts and genital area, made detectives momentarily question whether they had discovered a ritual killing. These symbolic wounds or ceremonial acts were uncommon, but they did occur in a few high-profile cases. Officers were cautious at that time, documenting the marks and collecting additional pictures for future review. Detective Sandra Lee, a stunning and attractive forensic expert who was dispatched to the scene, noted that the scars were neat and well-groomed. It was odd to her. The scars didn't resemble injuries from an attack. Evans concurred, mentally noting that after they collected the remaining forensic evidence, they would look more closely into Ava's medical history. Officers continued to secure the perimeter and make sure all evidence was meticulously gathered, treating the situation as though it might be a ritualistic or targeted killing in the absence of any immediate explanations. Jason Collins was interviewed by detectives in the foyer of the building as they examined the scene. He responded to inquiries in a flat, aloof tone, clearly shocked. Jason said he and Ava enjoyed a peaceful evening at home the previous evening and that there had been no strange occurrences. Despite taking his statement, police were cautious because of his rather aloof manner. The mystery behind the scars was eventually resolved later that day when they acquired Ava's medical records. The scars, which date back to years before she married Jason, were surgically created. They discovered that Ava had had gender-affirming surgery, was a transgender woman, and was designated male at birth. This discovery completely changed the course of the research. With Ava's identity at the core of the tragedy, what had initially seemed to be a possible ritualistic crime scene now suggested something much more complicated and intimate. Ava's 32-year-old husband, Jason Collins, was almost immediately named as the main suspect. Jason, a Marine assigned to Camp Pendleton, was renowned for his composed manner and systematic, orderly lifestyle. 2 years prior, he had met Ava at a veterans charity event close to the Hillcrest district, where they had informal discussions over pastries and coffee. Despite having different hobbies, the two were attracted to one another's uniqueness. Although Jason's conservative beliefs frequently ran counter to Ava's liberal ones, they appeared to be united by their admiration for one another. Jason characterized his wife as gregarious and enthusiastic as investigators started questioning him, especially regarding her job as an elementary school librarian. He said that Ava was well known at her school for her strong desire to teach LGBT literature, especially sexually explicit works, to the students. Although her attempts to introduce young people to a variety of stories were frequently commended by peers and students, they had also caused controversy among community members and conservative parents who were concerned about the graphic material their kids were being exposed to. Jason didn't fully agree with Ava's commitment to advancing LGBTQ and sexual topics in literature. There had been arguments between them when he told her that he believed it was advancing the liberal agenda, particularly in an elementary school context. Jason acknowledged feeling uneasy with Ava's passion when investigators questioned him further. Though it wasn't the first time, he dismissed the feeling that their values were essentially different, choosing to concentrate on their common experiences and the relationship they had formed. Nevertheless, given Ava's unknown past, detectives were intrigued by this divergence of opinion as a potential motivation. Officers told Jason about Ava's history as a guy, including her gender transition, while they questioned her further. His response was forceful. Jason's face went white, and he kept saying he didn't know Ava was transsexual. "I would have divorced her if I had known," he said, his voice a mix of surprise and rage. Investigators observed his response and kept a careful eye on him as he went on. Given his military experience, where honesty and integrity were highly valued, Jason stated that he felt betrayed and explained that trust was vital to him. Jason claimed that he believed their entire marriage had been based on a lie and that this realization caught him off guard. Jason's statements were carefully documented by detectives, who took note of the emotion he expressed. His conservative views and denial of knowledge regarding Ava's gender identity started to shape a potential motivation in the eyes of the investigators. They perceived Jason as a betrayed guy, whose unease with his wife's support of LGBTQ issues may have escalated into something more sinister. They had more questions than answers because he insisted on never knowing about Ava's transition, but it was obvious that his emotional condition and conservative views would be crucial to the inquiry. Ava's close friend Laura Martinez, 27, a social worker who devoted her life to helping transgender youngsters, was the second suspect. The bond between Laura and Ava was more than just friendship. In a relationship characterized by profound understanding and regard for one another, they had previously engaged in sexual activity. The two had stayed close even after their sexual relationship ended, and Laura was one of the few individuals Ava confided in about the specifics of her transition and personal challenges. Despite Laura's intense protectiveness of Ava, her feelings were nuanced, particularly after Ava wed Jason. Laura talked candidly about her complex relationship with Ava, and as it proved out, her more recent involvement with Jason when police brought her in for interrogation. Laura claimed that a few months after Ava and Jason were married, she had started having sex with Jason. She was casually candid in her description of this romance. She had been encouraging the pair to think about an open marriage, she told investigators. She stated that a recommendation was beneficial to all parties. And everyone bleeps better when I bleep. As she went on, detectives observed Laura's direct and unrepentant manner. Laura clarified that she thought an open marriage would help to reduce the conflict between Ava and Jason, especially because she could tell that Jason was uneasy about Ava's hardships and work. According to Laura, she believed that Ava and Jason could broaden their sexual horizons and establish a less constrictive dynamic by allowing their marriage to grow. However, Laura's own boundless libido was the driving force behind her suggestion. She wanted to be intimate with Jason and rekindle her sexual relationship with Ava. Investigators started to think that her motives were not totally selfless. Laura said that she used informal discussions with Ava to persuade her to accept her proposal, portraying it as progressive and advantageous, particularly for a couple with different personal beliefs. She was more straightforward with Jason, addressing his annoyance at Ava's commitment to LGBTQ causes and suggesting an open relationship as a way to bridge their widening gap. Laura positioned herself as a compassionate, unbiased friend when, in reality, all she wanted was more sex in an attempt to normalize the concept. Laura was questioned by police about her motivations, including if she had ever directly proposed this arrangement to Jason as a means of advancing her own agenda. Laura insisted that she merely wished to assist the couple in exploring the possibilities of a modern relationship and denied any manipulative purpose. Although she presented herself as someone who had been stuck between conflicting emotions, she acknowledged that she felt divided between her physical desire to Jason and her loyalty to Ava. After the conversation, the detectives had a better understanding of Laura's role and her perhaps self-serving intentions. They saw her hidden affair with Jason and her support of an open marriage as a source of underlying strain that might have affected the couple's relationship and ultimately contributed to it in the events leading up to Ava's death. 5 days after Ava's death, on March 20, 2014, San Diego investigators unearthed a finding that would alter the course of their investigation. An important piece of information was discovered that morning by a detective looking through Ava's medical records from the previous few years. Michael "Doggy" Torres Ancaco, the detective, was going over Ava's files in an attempt to uncover any medical information that could help explain the mysterious scars on her lower abdomen and chest that had initially baffled investigators. Torres made a crucial discovery. Jason, who had previously denied knowing, had actually learned that Ava had been assigned male at birth and had had gender-affirming surgery years before they met. Detectives required this material to fill in the gaps in their knowledge about Ava's history and her relationship with Jason. The scars on Ava's body became clear when it was discovered that she had been transgender. The main investigator quickly realized the ramifications of Detective Torres Ancaco's confession. This revelation sparked further inquiries about Jason's response to finding out about Ava's past, namely if he was aware of her identity before to their marriage or just learned about it after the wedding. Investigators started to speculate that this information might have contributed to Ava's demise. Jason's claims that he was unaware that Ava was transgender were noted when investigators re-examined his earlier remarks. He had even asserted that he would not have married her if he had known. This information appeared to provide a fresh perspective on Jason's surprise and possible rage upon discovering Ava's identity. Jason found it difficult to reconcile his emotions with his inflexible transphobic beliefs about gender roles and identity, and the police began to suspect a motivation connected to a sense of betrayal. The fact that Ava hadn't told her husband about this significant aspect of her life also caught the attention of the detectives. Something that now appeared to be a terrible choice motivated by society's underlying transphobia and chosen out of fear of rejection. Police started to suspect that Jason's response to Ava's identification was a major contributing factor to her death as they looked more closely at Ava's history and Jason's remarks. Laura Martinez also came back into focus as a result of the new facts. Detectives questioned whether Laura's actions were appropriate given her intimate contact with Ava, and her knowledge of her identity may have influenced Jason's suspicions or even led him to question Ava's past. Detectives were now attempting to piece together each connection dynamic and determine whether this discovery had triggered the sad events of that night, giving the case a new sense of urgency. This turn of events turned the case from what appeared to be a domestic conflict into a far more intricate investigation of betrayal, concealment, and personal identity. Detectives focused on Paul Reid, Jason's close friend and confidant, as they continued to look for clues. Paul, 34, was a lifelong Republican Party political organizer who was well known among his peers for being a devoted campaigner with strong conservative beliefs. Similar to Jason, he frequently stated his disdain of Ava's support of LGBT causes, and had even told Jason that he was worried about Ava's impact on local youth through her work as a librarian pushing sexually explicit books. However, as investigators delved deeper into Paul's background, a shocking revelation surfaced that went against his public persona. Paul concealed his sexual orientation from almost everyone around him while engaging in covert sexual relations with several males. As investigators looked through Paul's bank records, the first signs of his double existence emerged. Investigators found that Paul owed a number of male escorts in the San Diego area a substantial amount of money, with payments going back more than a year. Because of the regularity and size of the transactions, detectives began to question whether Paul's financial difficulties had exacerbated his already complicated friendship with Jason. The more they discovered, the more obvious it became that Paul's conservative persona was a front for a life he had taken great care to hide. Paul hesitantly admitted to an incident during a subsequent interrogation that showed how deeply involved he was in Jason's life. After a party one night, Paul confessed to drugging Jason by adding something to his drink to make sure he would get a good night's sleep. Paul, who had harbored feelings for Jason for years, went one step further once Jason was unconscious and had sex with him while he slept, something Jason was unaware of. Detectives were taken aback by Paul's revelation, which further complicated an already complex inquiry by revealing further disloyalty and ulterior motives. Investigators were now considering Paul as a possible suspect due to his unusually private attachment to Jason and jealousy of Ava, in addition to his financial secrets and concealed sexual orientation. They wondered if Paul had resentment toward Ava because he believed she had displaced Jason in a role he thought he could fill. Some investigators wondered if Jason's feelings regarding Ava's identity might have veered into darker area due to Paul's influence. Paul claimed to be conservative, yet his actions were a clear betrayal of the principles he professed to uphold. Investigators started thinking about how Jason's actions might have been motivated by this internal conflict and envy, either directly causing Ava's murder or by feeding his animosity toward her. It speculated that a tragic chain of events may have been initiated on the night of Ava's murder when Paul subtly encouraged Jason to confront her. Investigators became increasingly skeptical of Paul's involvement in the case after he confessed to drugging Jason and owed large sums of money to male escorts. Police thought they were on the trail of a sinister secret that may ultimately shed light on the complex network underlying Ava's murder, even if he was not detained right away. Jason Collins sat in his living room in the early hours of March 22, 2014. Repeatedly reliving the events of the previous few days. He no longer felt the same way about Ava, his wife of only a few months. It had upset him to learn that she was transsexual. Because of his military experience and rigorous upbringing, Jason had learned to see the world in black and white. Ava's secret now made him feel confined, deceived, and bewildered. He started to feel betrayed because he thought Ava had lied to him and concealed a basic aspect of herself. His rage had reached a boiling point by the time he faced her that evening. The altercation started as a heated dispute in their little San Diego apartment. Jason's annoyance became anger as their voices escalated. As the dispute got out of hand, he became enraged and grabbed Ava by the neck. He persisted in pressing until Ava became silent and lay motionless on the ground, overcome with a mixture of betrayal and incredulity. As his wife lay in front of him in those last seconds, Jason felt his rage change to an eerie serenity, a terrifying sense of relief. After realizing what he had done, he tried to make the scene appear to be a home argument gone horribly wrong by arranging the room in a way that would suggest a battle. Jason maintained a low profile in the days after the murder, going about his regular business at Camp Pendleton and maintaining a composed exterior. However, investigators were already assembling information that suggested to him Ava may have known her attacker because investigators found no evidence of forced entry into the flat. Small discrepancies in Jason's story also started to show. Although neighbors said they heard Ray's comments coming from their apartment that night, he insisted he was asleep when Ava passed away. Jason became noticeably anxious when police asked him more pointed questions, changing his account a little bit each time. Detectives' suspicions were validated by Ava's autopsy. The victim's strangling marks fit the description of a powerful attacker who would have required intimate, direct contact with them, granting Jason access to the residence and fitting his build. Jason was taken into custody by authorities at his flat on April 3, 2014. He looked shell-shocked as the officers handcuffed him, a look of incredulity mixed with an odd serenity on his face. He was fully aware of the seriousness of his conduct at the time of his arrest, yet he maintained a stoic silence and refused to speak. Many of Ava's friends were relieved by the arrest, especially her close friend Laura Martinez, who felt that Jason should be held accountable. Investigators were troubled by Jason's composed response because they questioned whether he felt regret for what he had done. A life had tragically ended as a result of his decisions, treachery, and rage, shattering both families in the process. Due to California's lengthy trial wait times, Jason Collins' trial started in January 2016, more than a year and a half after Ava Collins was brutally murdered. Miles Beck, Jason's 45-year-old defense attorney, was renowned for his astute tactics and adept handling of complex cases. Beck chose a contentious strategy, a transphobia defense contending that society's innate prejudice against transgender persons was the cause of Jason's violent outburst. Beck said that the root cause of Jason's behavior that evening was latent transphobia, claiming that unfavorable sentiments in society had contributed to Jason's incapacity to accept Ava's identity. Beck claimed in his opening remarks that Jason had acted in a moment of extreme betrayal and confusion. He portrayed Jason as a conventional, conservative man who had been brought up with traditional values, explaining how learning Ava's identity had caused him to fall into a state of internal turmoil and wrath. In order to demonstrate how cultural influences and a lack of knowledge about gender identity could cause someone to act unreasonably when confronted with such a revelation, Beck even called in professional witnesses, including psychologists. It was obvious that the defense wanted to shift blame away from Jason and presented the murder as what they called a sad but reasonable response to Ava's deceit. The prosecution vigorously contested the defense's strategy under the direction of 38-year-old Assistant District Attorney Carlos Sanchez. She said in her closing remarks that this was not a social issue. This has to do with Jason Collins' incapacity to accept his wife. It was his decision, not the influence of society, that caused Ava Collins to die. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury found the defendant guilty of second-degree murder. Jason received a sentence of 25 years in prison without the chance of release. Jason maintained the same aloof manner he had displayed during the trial, looking expressionless as the punishment was read. In a subsequent brief speech to the court, he reiterated his conviction that cultural issues had impacted his behavior and that he felt misunderstood. Although many were unhappy about the defense's reliance on transphobia as a cause, Ava's friends and family felt that the verdict was fair. Although Ava's best friend, Laura Martinez, was relieved that Jason was held responsible, she was angry that Ava's identity and existence had been exploited as a point of conflict. Though it raised unanswered concerns regarding bias, acceptance, and responsibility in cases concerning gender identity, the punishment ultimately signaled the end of a tragic chapter. Life took unforeseen turns for the main players in the case following Jason Collins' conviction and imprisonment in January 2016. Jason received a 25-year sentence without the possibility of release at a high-security prison in Colorado. He developed into a divisive character during his incarceration, frequently garnering media attention for his remarks regarding his offense. Though few believed his justifications were compelling, he regularly accused society of being responsible for the murder, saying that he was a victim of his upbringing. As Jason's sentence progressed over the years, his narrative was less frequently reported in the media. But the public's memory of Ava's untimely death and the dramatic trial persisted. Ava's longtime friend Laura Martinez, on the other hand, leveraged the case's exposure to start a new career. As a licensed therapist, Laura had always had a passion for assisting people with relationship problems, particularly negotiating intricate gender and identity relationships. She started providing counseling services centered on sex therapy and LGBTQ+ concerns after Ava passed away. Many of her clients who were looking for understanding in their personal situations found resonance in her caring and open-minded attitude. Laura frequently talked about how Ava's passing motivated her to fight for a more accepting, compassionate society where individuals of all genders may be accepted for who they are. Following the trial, Jason's younger brother Paul Collins's life underwent a significant change. Paul found himself reassessing his own opinions, especially his conservative ones, in the wake of his brother's conviction. Paul had long been a Republican, just like Jason, but the circumstances of his brother's crime caused him to reconsider his views on gender identity and LGBT+ issues. Paul came out as gay in public at the end of 2017 and declared his intention to leave the Republican Party, citing his increasing dissatisfaction with the party's position on LGBT+ issues. After becoming a vocal supporter of LGBTQ+ rights, he quickly joined the Democratic Party and sided with candidates who favored inclusivity and equal rights. Paul talked candidly about his path to self-acceptance in the Denver Post, one of the local news agencies that extensively covered his metamorphosis. Despite the fact that tragedy had impacted their lives, Jason, Laura, and Paul all attempted to modify their circumstances in unique ways, transforming traumatic events into opportunities for personal growth. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share. See you on the next crime story.